Good day, everyone. Welcome to the 2020 version of the Bristol Bay Wild Salmon Celebration. We'd sure love to be in DC again, in-person celebration of this great resource that we've all come to know and love, but the pandemic changes plans and we can deal with that ourselves with a remote presentation today. So thanks again for joining us. By now, some of that Bristol Bay wild sockeye salmon ought to be in your neighborhood grocery stores, and we hope you picked some up and enjoyed some at home with your family and friends. While we'll not be partaking of that together this year, we still want to celebrate that incredible resource and update you on what's going on in Bristol Bay with the salmon fishery and the people, as well as the proposed Pebble Mine. If you have comments or questions during this presentation, there's a private chat function to the right of your screen for those of you who are signed into YouTube. And there is a Google form function for those of you not signed into YouTube at the bottom of your screen. And we can go through those and get to as many questions and comments as we can. The beginning of our presentation today is going to include comments from BVNC's leadership team of Joe Chitlick, the chairman, and Jason Matrokin, president and CEO. And then we're extremely grateful today to have our congressional delegation here for some remarks as well. So without any further ado, let's get started with the chairman of BVNC, Joe Chitlick.
Joe Chitlick. Untitled Bristol Bay Corporation Board Titan. Iluksis kamti jali asameach an Bristol Bay nukautai angniut klimski. Umuak sit kamti Bristol Bay nukain jali su nunamta knikstaini. Huyana illautuchi matumi nidilimi. Jalisu asilin nachtuchi Kanschetnik Bristol Bay. Hello everyone, I'm Joe Chitlick, Chairman of Bristol Bay Native Corporation Board. I want to welcome you to our annual Bristol Bay Wild Salmon Celebration. We appreciate all of you who love Bristol Bay salmon and our beautiful region of Alaska. Thank you for joining us this week, special week of activities, and we hope you enjoyed today's event featuring voices from Bristol Bay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Fun fact, Chairman Chitlick, as a child, went to school at the Mission School on Lake Aliknagik in Bristol Bay. Fast forward over 50 years, and during his tenure as chairman, Bristol Bay Native Corporation bought the Mission Lodge, which is now a fly-in fishing lodge, into the BVNC family. And now BVNC gets to share that experience that the chairman had with people from all over the world. It's been a real successful operation for BVNC and a remarkable place. If any of you have been there, if you haven't, maybe put it on your list. We will now go to BVNC's president and CEO, Jason Matrokin.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Matrokin, president and CEO of Bristol Bay Native Corporation. Thank you so much for joining us for the 2020 Bristol Bay Wild Salmon Celebration. Although this celebration may look different from past years, we truly hope that you will enjoy this exciting schedule of virtual events we have for you this week. Today, you'll hear directly from Bristol Bay residents in a special panel presentation discussing something they and other regional residents value deeply, wild salmon. While we cannot gather this week in person, we know that you are supporters of Bristol Bay, and we hope that you'll enjoy today's discussion. It is my distinct honor to begin today's event with special introductory remarks from our members of the Alaska Delegation. All three of our Alaska Delegation members are former Fish First awardees, and each of them joined BVNC to celebrate Bristol Bay's wild salmon every year, if not more often. Thank you for being here today, and we hope to see you again tomorrow for a special cook-along with Chef Tom Douglas.
Thank you very much, Jason, and we'll go right to you, Senator Murkowski. Thank you for coming.
Okay, can everyone see and hear me? The little note up top says, I'm in the show. Everyone can see and hear me. It's good to be with you, but I will tell you, I miss the gatherings on the rooftop with the many fans and friends of Bristol Bay Native Association, those who come together for the wild salmon celebration. I know that we are operating in a time of Zoom and conferences telephonically, and you're not making the trek back to Washington, D.C. But this is actually one of those evenings where it might be nice to be on a rooftop. The weather's actually improved a little bit. For those of you who may or may not be able to see me, I'm wearing my Bristol Bay. We are Bristol Bay fishermen, just for the occasion. I want to be part of a celebration. When you think about of celebration, even at a time that has been difficult. And I know we're doing so much virtually, but I want to share with you that Senator Sullivan and I determined that COVID or no COVID, we were still going to share some of the bounties from Bristol Bay with our colleagues that we work with on a daily basis. And so about a month ago, we were able to share a nice sockeye fillet with our members of the Senate. And I can tell you the testimonials that I received about that was the best fish ever. And they told me about how they were so worried about making sure that it was going to be frozen until the time that they made it to North Carolina or up into North Dakota. So your fish, your bounty that was shared proudly by your Alaska senators generated some good friendships. So thank you for that. The fact that we're still gathering to celebrate the Bristol Bay region and to honor wild salmon, I think is really a testament to the resilience that Bristol Bay communities have demonstrated this year. We all know that it has been a year of challenge, but I think that what we have seen is an effort to come together to meet the adversities that we have been faced with, a dedication, with a collaboration, with a focus. It has allowed you, with that focus, to be able to have a successful fishing season, another successful and strong salmon return. That in itself is an incredible achievement. Just the determination that we saw of our fishermen to ensure that our fisheries were kept open and our communities kept safe. We still know that we're facing many, many headwinds from COVID. We've seen disruption to supply chain. It has affected the fish prices. It's hindered people's ability to travel. Restaurants, in many, many cases, are not open. We have seen that impact. So the delegation has been working hard for you, with you, to provide a level of assist, whether it is the Paycheck Protection Program, the direct fisheries assistance that we work so hard to find, or just the recent announcement with regards to relief for China's retaliatory tariffs. Making sure that there are sufficient workers for our processors to keep the processing facilities and the canneries open and going. This has all been a challenge, but you rose to the challenge. So my appreciation, and again, a recognition that it did not come without a lot of work. And then in the midst of all of this, the region, of course, has been closely watching the permitting process for the Pebble project. So many of you have weighed in with my office. I appreciate that. I have been working hard for the past several years, since 2017, making sure that Alaskans' voices are heard, that the agencies are adhering to a fair and a rigorous and a thorough process. It was just last year at the gathering up on the rooftop that I was just speaking about that I made a very firm statement that the bar must be high, the threshold must be high, and if the project applicants cannot meet that, a permit should not be issued. I then went on to insert language in the appropriations bill that affirmed that, and what we have really advocated for is that the federal agencies rely on scientific information, not politics, to arrive at the discussion. And so after this very rigorous, very thorough process, the Corps has found that the Pebble project as currently proposed does not meet that high bar. And I have said, if you don't meet the high bar, then a permit should not be issued. So we continue to be engaged in this, as I know that so many of you in the region are as well. But for those who have voiced concerns to me and others in the delegation about the process, I think this latest determination by the Corps indicates that the process is working as intended. So it has been hard. I know it has been arduous. I recognize that. And we want to be at a place where those of you who have contributed valuable input throughout this process know that there is some certainty here. So I'm going to end my comments tonight because I know you've got a tight schedule. You want to get the rest of the delegation on. I want to end my comments with a thanks to BBNC, to Bristol Bay Native Corporation, to Jason Metrokin, not only for doing this event, but for really working together on so many of these issues that are so important to us. Know that I am going to continue my celebration of Bristol Bay wild salmon by enjoying a nice salmon dinner that I have prepared in my kitchen from my freezer from your region. So thank you all, and thank you for the goodness of the bounty. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Senator Murkowski. We know how passionate you are, and our entire delegation is, about Alaska salmon. And with you, we have picture proof of that. If we can put that picture up for a moment. So now we have a pop quiz. Senator Murkowski caught this fish in Alaska, of course, and has it on the wall in her Senate offices. If you could share the name of the fish in the private chat or in the Google form, then you will get a shout out a little bit later in the program. Thanks very much. Next up, we will hear from Senator Dan Sullivan. Welcome, Senator Sullivan.
Hello, Peter, and thanks again for having me. And it's an honor to be able to say a few words. And to Jason and the rest of the team at BBNC, thank you. I, like Lisa, am really sad that we're not actually in person. The great Bristol Bay Wild Salmon event on the rooftop is not just amazing for all the Alaskans, but all the supporters of wild salmon, particularly Bristol Bay salmon in Alaska. But of course, it's got great food and very good beer too. The brew that's been put together for that has been a great part of the tradition as well. So I just want to first begin by thanking everybody. I think the one thing that I think is so important, we're talking about the celebration, but Lisa really hinted at it, is certainly from our perspective, the sense of working together on so many of the issues that impact the region, that impact our salmon fisheries. I had the opportunity to get out to the region again this summer, despite the challenges with the pandemic. And I love our Bristol Bay salmon. As you know, I spent a lot of time on the Yukon fishing salmon there, and but I think most Alaskans just love that tradition, whether it's on the Yukon or in Bristol Bay. I talked last summer about the nice little boat ride I had with one of your board members, Robin Samuelson, who I paddled him in most of the evening because our engine broke down. But it was a great, memorable event for me and Robin, and some of my team. He was, of course, regaling us with stories about the region, his many run-ins with politicians over the years. Who knew? I didn't know that John Wayne used to visit Dillingham quite a lot. But so to Robin and others, thank you. But I want to go back to this issue of working together. I think when the pandemic hit, there was so much uncertainty. And what we wanted to do with so many of you was make sure that to the extent we could, without really being able to predict the future, is work together to get us through this pandemic. So if you looked at, for example, every aspect of the CARES Act, really tried to incorporate our fishermen to make sure they were taken care of. There was the $300 million relief fund. You may have seen just last week on the Senate floor, we put forward a bill that we voted on. 52 senators voted for it. Unfortunately, it couldn't get past a filibuster block, but we had an additional $500 million in that bill for individual fisheries with regard to relief. And we know that that's going to be important for our state. I just had a discussion with our Commissioner of Fish and Game just about an hour ago on making sure we're getting that relief money out to our fishing communities. Lisa mentioned it was something I worked hard on with the administration, but this brand new program for it's a $500 million program, first time ever USDA is doing a program for fishermen to get relief from countries that undertake retaliatory tariff actions against us. They've always done it for farmers, which of course is appropriate, but I've been making the argument that, our fishermen harvest food, they process food, they get it out to millions of Americans and around the world, and they should be able to benefit from similar programs. And that's something else we worked on with regard to testing. I know that there was a lot of concerns, but again, working together this summer, we were able to still have the fishery open. And we really pressed this administration from the president on down to help surge testing resources to the region to make sure we were able to get through the challenging times of the pandemic. And again, say that if we're getting this out to farming communities, we really need to get it out to our fishery communities. So again, working together, hearing from all of you, we worked hard on that. And finally, on the issue of making sure we have healthy oceans and remain the superpower of seafood and remain having these very strong runs in Bristol Bay like we again experienced this summer. My Save Our Seas Act passed, I think you all know, in last Congress, but the one that we just passed in the Senate in January that we're trying to get passed in the House right now, literally as we speak, was viewed. The Congressional Research Service called this the most comprehensive ocean cleanup legislation ever to come out of the Senate. So we're working hard on that. I know that so many of you really care and have focused on that issue. And of course, I also just want to mention the issue of Pebble. This is another one where, again, working with all of you, what I had been saying for really many years is to make sure, just what Lisa said, that we have a process. You have to go through it free of politics. What I emphasize with literally the highest levels of the federal government is that this isn't a political decision. This is a decision that should be based on science and data. We know we have an incredible resource in the region already, which is the salmon resource. So you can't trade one resource for another. And that we had to make sure that the agencies and the federal government, the White House, everybody was listening to Alaskans. Listening to Alaskans. As you all know, there's Alaskans on all sides of this debate, but one of the things that I made sure happened is that your voices were heard at the highest levels of the government, because I think that's an important part of what we're supposed to be doing as your representatives. And when this high bar, based on science and data, not politics, was determined not to have been met, and as Lisa mentioned, as part of that process, which is what we told them to focus on, that's something that, as you probably saw, I supported, as that's the way in which this process was supposed to work. I know that this is an issue that so many of you have been focused on, and again, my theme today is working together on all of these issues for a healthy, brighter future. I know we have challenges, but we're going to get through these challenging times more resilient. stronger, more resilient than ever for our state, I think for our country, and for the Bristol Bay region. So I really, again, I'll end by starting where we began. I wish we were all here in person celebrating. Hopefully that's going to happen soon. But to everybody putting on this really important week of celebration and education, congratulations. We're always honored to be part of it.
Thank you very much, Senator Sullivan. I've heard that story about Robin and you on the boat, and it proves that you've both labored for Bristol Bay and labored in Bristol Bay. So thank you again for your comments. We will now hear from Representative Don Young.
Hello. I'm Congressman Don Young. It's good to see you. I'm sorry I can't be there. Remember last year we were up on top of a beautiful building looking at the sunset and the Capitol and everything else, eating good food, all kinds of different Alaskan seafood. And I do want to thank you, though, for, this Bristol Bay Regional Seafood Development Association to be putting this on. I really want to thank you for allowing me to put on a film. Our fish, your fish, is the best fish in the world. I keep saying that. And I, again, want to keep reminding people about Alaskan wild salmon. Of course, the other fish, too. They're good, too. But I keep reminding people we have the best and we'll continue to have the best. We have to take care of it. And, I've been working very hard to make sure that we don't have any, what they call farm-raised fish off our shores, so we can keep our wild Alaskan salmon first in the area, first again, and first in the nation. I introduced the Keep Fin Fish Free Act last year, and then we're working on it again. That makes sure our fin fish are free in our waters in Alaska. We would continue to work on this, and by the way, in the business of fisheries, we had some work with CARES. Some money will help out. You just recently saw that our fishermen will be eligible again, just like the lobster were in Maine, where the fishermen would be eligible if there's unfair tariffs from other countries. I think that's a very important factor. We worked on all the CARES Act so fishermen themselves can be affected. Again, I want to thank you very frankly again for having me on this show, and good luck to you. I hope next year you bring the fish with you, and we'll come down here and have a good time again talking to one another and trying to get things done for the fishing industry in the state of Alaska. It's the best. God bless you all and have a good one.
All right, thank you. We're now turning to the Bristol Bay Voices Panel, during which we will hear from these panelists who have deep ties to the region about the important role that salmon plays in Bristol Bay, and also what their concerns are with the proposed Pebble Mine and why it's such a bad idea. Before we go to the panelists for their comments, though, we're going to start with just a quick status check on Pebble. We know from this multi-decade controversy now that there are three attributes of this mine that make it such a risky endeavor. That's its size. It needs to be massive in order to be economically feasible. Its type. Some of the ore within the Pebble deposit is potentially acid generating, which could cause significant pollution problems in Bristol Bay in perpetuity. And we also know that the location of the mine is extremely sensitive at the headwaters of two of Bristol Bay's most prolific salmon waters. After years of delay and promises, Pebble in 2017 finally applied for its Clean Water Act permit process that's regulated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And since that time, the Corps of Engineers has done what's called an environmental impact process to assess the potential impacts of the proposed Pebble Mine. That culminated in late July of this year, in 2020, with a final environmental impact statement. And that impact statement documented massive potential impacts from the proposed Pebble Mine. This was only on a 20-year mine plan that was analyzed by the Corps, which targets less than 13% of the Pebble ore deposit And Pebble has never shown that to be an economically feasible approach to mining the deposit. But nevertheless, the Corps, analyzing that 20-year mine plan, said that there would be over 2,800 acres that would be lost of wetlands that would be lost from that plan, and over 130 miles of streams. If you look at the mine plan that goes over 50%, just slightly over 50% of the ore deposit, those numbers jump to over 10,000 acres of wetlands and over 300 miles of streams. These are massive impacts by any indication, and unprecedented, certainly in Alaska. The final EIS, as an administrative matter, opens the door for the final decision from the Corps on the Pebble permit. As you heard from our senators, at the end of August, the Corps of Engineers found that looking at the science, Pebble is likely to cause significant degradation of Bristol Bay's waters. If the Corps holds true to this finding in its final decision, a finding that is certainly supported by science and the administrative record, Pebble will not get a permit. Meanwhile, Pebble had never submitted a real compensatory mitigation plan for the proposed mine, which is a critical part of the process. The Corps said to them, you have until the end of November to do that. And we expect to see a plan, therefore, from Pebble by that time, just prior to the Corps making its decision. So now we're going to turn to our panel. We're joined by Kim Williams, Hazel Nelson, and Tim Troll. And we're going to start the program with some opening remarks from these folks. So we'll start with Kim, who's a BBNC board director, and also some congratulations are in order. She was recently appointed interim director of the Bristol Bay campus of the University of Alaska. She's also worked as the executive director of Ninota Luxta, which means caretakers of the land. And she's been a staunch advocate for Bristol Bay her whole life, and a protector of Bristol Bay from Pebble for decades. Kim, can you give us an idea of what kind of impact, first of all, how did your summer go? How did Bristol Bay's summer go? And then some thoughts on that.
Thank you, Peter. And it's good to be with everybody, even though we are not back in Washington, D.C. on the rooftop. We will get there once again, and we will share Bristol Bay salmon once again, and the beer that's brewed from Alaska. I want to say that our 137-year-old commercial fishery came off and went off for the 2020 salmon season, and we had about 54 million sockeye return, and our commercial fishermen from around our nation and Alaska and Bristol Bay, they harvested about 35 million fish. My dad, who just turned 82 years old, still commercial fishes, and so I want to say a shout out. He may be one of the oldest commercial fishermen out there in the bay fishing, with my two sons, who now are getting to the age where they should be manning their own boats, and hopefully they'll do that soon. I want to say that they did this all amidst this COVID pandemic, and we didn't see any community spread of COVID in our community. And so I want to say a shout out and a thank you to the salmon processors, to our local people who really hammered home that we need to keep everybody safe and we shouldn't have community spread. And so, a big thanks from Bristol Bay that kept everybody safe, yet at the same time allowed people to make money for commercial fishing. We have seen impacts, but this focus on this presentation is all about wild salmon and the celebration and how Pebble would impact it. And I want to say during this summer, while our tribe was going through the draft EIS and commenting, because our tribe is a cooperating agency, we had to focus on a draft EIS, getting our comments in before a final EIS came out, and at the same time deal with COVID. So we were pretty busy and put up fish and put in fish into our smokehouses. And so it was a very busy summer, and I want to say it's a sigh of relief kind of now that we are kind of giving a moment to focus in on the mitigation that will happen. And so I am happy that the Corps has gone to Pebble to say, you need to give us a real mitigation plan. And the mitigation really needs to focus on the Kuchtuli River, because as a subsistence user, I am a subsistence user putting fish into my smokehouse. The salmon, the king salmon that go up into the Kuchtuli and spawn from the Malchatna, that's what really prizes the people. We love king salmon. And so to me, I want to make sure that we, hold the Corps accountable and focus in on the science like Senator Murkowski and Sullivan discussed. And so that to me is holding the Corps, this federal agency, to hold their feet to the fire. And to me, it's because salmon are so prized in Bristol Bay, and we should set a high bar. And I'm really thankful that we still have a commercial fishery, and we will still have a commercial fishery as long as we take care of our oceans and our land for future generations. I really don't want to be in a position, 20 years from now saying what we didn't do enough. And so we have to pay attention and stay focused and make sure we follow this process. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks so much, Kim. Really appreciate that. If anybody has shaken the hand of a Bristol Bay fisherman, even if they're in their 80s, it's like shaking the hand of someone with a catcher's mitt on. These are the strongest hands you'll ever see. Kim's father, I'm sure, is no exception. We just before we go to Hazel, we did get a response. Suzanne Lovell realized it was a king salmon, and if you go into Senator Murkowski's conference room in D.C., make sure you say hello to Walter up on the wall. So now we'll turn to Hazel Nelson, who's also a Bristol Bay Native Corporation board director, and for many years she worked with the Alaska Department of Game as the director of the Division of Subsistence. Hazel, can you give us some idea about the importance of Bristol Bay wild salmon to the people of Bristol Bay? What role it plays in your lives and your culture? Maybe add a favorite way you like to cook those salmon, and also give us your thoughts on the proposed double mine and the risks imposed to Bristol Bay.
Sure, Peter. Thank you very much for inviting me to be on the program, and I'd like to thank all of our friends who have joined us in the fight to protect our very lives, because Bristol Bay salmon is so critical to part of who we are that the scientists have put it this way. They say that we're biologically adapted to salmon, but we didn't need scientists to describe to us how it's the cornerstone of our physical and mental health and well-being. Although we know the scientists know about omega-3s now, we knew for thousands of years how critical salmon was to our health. Do you know that in Bristol Bay in particular, we're unique in that 58% of our subsistence harvest is sockeye salmon. Another 9% is other salmon. I think 20% are moose and caribou and other mammals. But as you know, most people in Alaska who are indigenous and have fish in their diets, salmon is critical, of course. But for Bristol Bay, 58% is the largest part of our annual subsistence harvest. It amounts to, when I worked for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, the Division of Subsistence does harvest surveys for how much people rely on subsistence foods. And on average, Bristol Bay has harvested about 190 pounds annually per person in each household. And that's the edible parts of the salmon. So it's, if you take out the backbone and the tail, all the rest, it comes to over 190 pounds a year of sockeye salmon. So that says a lot about how we are biologically adapted to salmon. It's intrinsic in our culture, in everything about preparing for our harvests. It's especially salmon. That's the largest harvest to prepare for annually, and entire households participate and contribute in doing it. So It's very much a part of our family activities and passing on ways to prepare for the harvest season, what to do with how to smoke it, salting it, drying it, every way that our people preserve salmon so that we can live healthily through the rest of the year. And we're always getting ready, and we're always bartering, we're always sharing. In fact, the part about sharing and caring for others, not just in our family, but with elders and friends, that is a very important, not just a tradition, it's part of our spirituality, the sharing and caring for others. It's also a reverence for what's healthy and keeping our environment healthy. It's a very important part of our entire mental, physical, social, economic well-being. And we can't separate ourselves from having a healthy source of food. You know, it's for thousands of years, we lived in settlements that were not the current village locations now. And a lot of the settlements, the streams, the islands have unique place names that are identified in our language, such as this is a good place to harvest coho, or this is a good place to harvest red salmon and pick berries in the fall. Those place names are intrinsic to everything that is about our culture. And we are a salmon people. We're not, we don't want to trade in the health of our well-being for farmed salmon, because we are non-genetically modified and we want to maintain our health. You know, one of the ways I think my favorite way is just making salmon strips. And our smokehouse right now is smoking today. We're in the last day of smoking our annual salmon strips, and I'll be enjoying to share that with the folks that come visit us. I'll be sharing it with our family, sending some somewhere. And I think the question that you have about Pebble is on the risks that the mine poses for us. It's more than just a threat of poisoning our food source. It will undermine completely our way of life, our way of sharing, our way of being. And I don't think that the Pebble Mine promoters understand that. I don't think they understand how deeply they are a threat to us. But I will tell you that when the threat of this mine is gone, we're going to have a lot of celebrations, and those celebrations will occur, and we'll be thanking all the people who have helped us get rid of this threat. We'll have a lot of potlucks. We'll have songs in our native language of victory, and we'll have songs of great joy. Peter, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
How wonderful, Hazel. Thank you. I can hear the celebration now, and can't wait for that. And salmon strips are my favorites, so I got my mouth watering with your description there. Thank you very much. Before we go to Tim Troll, I'll introduce him. I just want to emphasize, if you have questions for the panelists, there are two ways that you can get them to us. If you're signed into YouTube, the private chat function on the right side of your screen, you can present a question there. Or if you look at the bottom in the Google form, you can present a question there. So now we're going to turn to Tim Troll, who is the Executive Director of the Bristol Bay Heritage Land Trust, which is dedicated to the preservation and protection of salmon habitat in Bristol Bay. Tim is also an historian on Bristol Bay, and recently has been working on restoring a Bristol Bay double-ender sailboat, which he plans to sail from Homer to Bristol Bay when it is safe to do so. Tim, can you give us your view? Why have you dedicated so much of your life to Bristol Bay and protecting this amazing special place?
Well, Peter, can you hear me all right? Yeah, well, I was just very fortunate back in the 90s to get an invitation to come and be the CEO of Chug Young Limited, Native Corporation in Dillingham. And that gave me, before that, even though I was many years in Alaska, I'd only sort of had a vague understanding of what Bristol Bay was about, and that there were fish down there, that they used to have these sailboats that fished down there. But when I got out there and began to see people and visit with people and begin to understand what a unique place Bristol Bay is and how fortunate I was to actually be able to come and move there and actually raise my kids out there, you couldn't ask for more. And it was through Chug Young Limited, the board of directors there. It was in the late 90s. They were becoming very concerned with salmon runs. The price of permits were down. And the concern was that, local folks were maybe looking to sell native allotments in critical habitat areas. And that's when the board there decided to form the Bristol Bay Heritage Land Trust, now 20 years old. So that's sort of my entree into it, is through running a Native Corporation board and seeing, there, even though you were a corporate CEO in charge of trying to make money for your corporation, certainly among my board and all of our shareholders, there was a certain understanding that we don't do things there that are going to harm the salmon. And, thinking of what Hazel just said, and place names and language, the Yupik word for fish, the base word is nuka, and it's the same word for food. So there's an equivalence between food and fish, and there's no doubt you see that in Bristol Bay, because when fish are running, everybody is all about fish. If you wanted to know about the resolve of the people in Bristol Bay to continue to resist what they feel is a very real danger to that fishery, look at the language. I mean, that word has been around for thousands of years, and it's there. The equivalence between food and fish speaks to me that the resolve is there. It's never going to be any different. So also, when we think about a high bar, back in the early days when a lot of this pebble became on the horizon, and you look at what folks in the region did, I'm reminded of the whole effort back in 2013 when the state changed the Bristol Bay area plan, and people became alarmed. We actually put together our own area plan and looked at what we thought would be high bars for any kind of mineral development in the region. And one of those high bars was no perpetuity. We should not have a project like that to be around forever. So when I look at what are those high bars we should be looking at, we should not be allowing a mine in that region that is going to be around until the next glaciers come through. And that's something that people out there have consistently said throughout this entire effort. And I don't think that should be ignored. And certainly the people out there aren't going to ignore it, and they're going to stick with it until we have all the celebrations that were just mentioned. So thanks, Peter.
Thank you so much, Tim. And we're now going to get to some questions. The first one I'll actually take. Beyond mitigation, what other issues are there with Pebble's proposal? And the Corps of Engineers talked about these in a statement of policy on August 24th, and it referenced a number of the guidelines that it has to evaluate before making a decision about Pebble's permit, and certainly mitigation is one of those. Other aspects of those guidelines include potential impacts to the physical and chemical characteristics of the aquatic ecosystem, the biological characteristics of the ecosystem. Tim mentioned the treatment in perpetuity. Pebble presented a plan that only dealt with that in concept. It was an unprecedented amount of water that they're proposing to treat, and they have to do it in perpetuity until everything else. So the Corps apparently noticed these same deficiencies that we saw, is looking seriously at those too as part of its final permit decision. There's a lot of things beyond mitigation that are real issues here as well, and science really needs to drive those. Let's back up for a moment, though, and Kim, I have a question here for you as well. In terms of Pebble's social license to operate, what have you seen over the many years you've been involved in the Pebble efforts in Bristol Bay?
So I got involved in Pebble back in the late 80s. And so I've been working on this for like 19 years. And early on, it was educating the people of the region about what Pebble is. And so we held some conferences here as part of the university. But the social license, I think, as people learned more and more about this project and its impacts, the alarm bell went off in people that you couldn't have this project and not have degradation and not have impacts to our streams, water streams, and then our fish, and then the rest of our natural resources. And so I think this region, as soon as people learned about this project and the impacts, that social license was never granted. And that, to me, speaks volumes for the people of this region, who have not only wanted to protect our land and against this project, but they worked so hard for 40 years protecting our oceans and oil and gas drilling, and they never broke that resolve. And so I think it speaks volumes that when this region, when they say there is no social license, there is no social license, and they will continue to fight until they get the protections that they need. And I think that's a testament to the resilience of the people of this region.
Thank you, Kim. That's really, if anything, that opposition seems to have grown over that period of time. That's really an education element to it as well. I'll turn now to Tim. A question you with your great historical perspective on Bristol Bay. What, in your view, how has the history of Bristol Bay's strong leaders shaped Bristol Bay that we know today?
Well, you can certainly look at the commercial fishery. There was a long period of time when that fishery was dominated by outsiders and by sailboats. And the reason, in many ways, that we now have a commercial fishery that has many local residents in it is because people like Harvey Samuelson and others back in the early 50s really fought to get residents into that fishery. And certainly when the war came along and all the outside fishermen couldn't come or were working in factories, the canneries had to turn to the locals. And you know what they found out? Locals were pretty good at sailing, and they also knew where the fish were. And so it became the time when people could get into it. And it was strong leadership that actually brought the fishery into more local control, more response to local people. And certainly the sailboats, although they're charming and beautiful and wonderful, when that fishery began to turn over more to the independents, and those independents tended to be local fishermen, that's when probably the end of the sailboat days was inevitable, and it came, well, almost 75 years ago now. So if you're looking at local leadership in terms of what's going to happen in the future to this particular project, nobody should sit there and think that somehow the leaders are going to die off and we can get this project in, because history doesn't demonstrate that that's likely to happen.
Thanks, Tim. It's really interesting to see the generation upon generation involvement in the Bristol Bay fishery. We know that many families have been 5 generations or more involved in the Bristol Bay fishery, and they can look forward to a bright future as long as that good stewardship of local leadership continues. Here's a question that came in as well, and any of you can take it. But, the relative benefit to the region of a generation or so of mining versus the Bristol Bay salmon fishery. How do you balance those two? Hazel, do you have a thought on that?
Yes, I certainly do. I think that the limitations that a mine could offer cannot compare with the importance of food security, not just for our people in Bristol Bay, but for Alaskans who are coming to rely on the health of a reliable and large enough fishery in Alaska to replace the losses of local fish stocks increasingly around the state of Alaska. For those people who pay attention to how salmon stocks are occurring around the state, we're having one collapse after another. And it's occurring more regularly now in some regions than others. In fact, this past summer, a small processor has been able to provide, I think it was just around 50,000 pounds of Bristol Bay sockeye to a region in Alaska. Another region got about 50,000 pounds. And this is unheard of because these salmon from Bristol Bay are going to other regions that have had hundreds of years of sustained fishing that included commercial fisheries. From what I understand, this processor has also sent our Bristol Bay salmon out to some reservations in the lower 48. So, I just can make no comparison to a short-lived poisonous mine compared to the long-term provisions for food security, not just to Bristol Bay, but to other Alaskans as well now. Thank you, Peter.
Perpetuity salmon versus perpetuity water treatment. That sounds like a pretty straightforward choice. I'll note one final question for the panelists, but before I do that, I want to encourage the audience to stick around for these responses because we have an absolutely amazing video of Bristol Bay and the Iliamna Lake region from Jason King. Not very long, but I'll tell you it will be found. Now, just the question, maybe each of you could address this. What would it mean for you? Let's assume that the permit is denied by the Corps of Engineers. What's next for Bristol Bay? What's next for you? Where will you turn your energies at that point in time when you won't have to spend so much of your time fighting the proposed Pebble mine? Why don't we start with Kim?
I guess if I heard your question right, Peter, it's once Pebble is gone, what are we going to do in Bristol Bay and focus our energy? And for years, we've been so focused in on fighting Pebble and educating not only Alaskans, but our nation and the world about this project and the dangers of this project. I would like to go back to a day where we can focus in on the economics of Bristol Bay and how do we lower the cost of energy? How do we get our kids into post-secondary education and get them through and get them back home here for jobs? I mean, those are great things that I would love to focus my energy on, and not only focus my energy, but focus our organizations here in Bristol Bay and our partners that we've made in fighting. There used to be a time when subsistence fishermen, commercial fishermen, and sports fishermen used to fight all the time over who gets to take and harvest salmon. And now we are working together. And I would love for us to be at a place where we can all work together so that we can educate our youth in our region so that they become our fishery biologists that work in Fish and Game. They work in our lodges and show how unique and beautiful Bristol Bay is to people who want to come in and experience this life. And that to me is energy that I would love us to focus in on, and making sure that we all have jobs and we have low cost energy and we can live here and thrive out here in Bristol Bay. Because one of the things that we keep hearing is we don't have jobs in our villages, and I want to do everything in my power that I can do to make sure that if you wanted to stay in Bristol Bay and live in your community, then what can we do to make sure that we have the jobs there so that you can still pay for your lights and heat your house? And so that to me is energy that I would like to focus in on rather than fighting Pebble.
Well, we all know how much energy Kim Williams has. So it's going to be a great effort coming from you, I'm sure. Hazel, do you have a perspective? What would the taking Pebble completely off the table mean to you and your family and your community?
Yes, Peter, I think aside from the threat that Pebble currently presents, we have things that are occurring in our environment. We have out in the ocean acidification. We have warming temperatures. As you know, what's occurring right in the lower 48 with all the hurricanes and wildfires. Well, out in the Pacific Ocean, there are major things that are occurring, and it does relate to a lot of the salmon crashes around Alaska. And Alaska has long been America's fish basket. Well, Bristol Bay's the salmon basket, not just for Alaska, but for the world. In fact, our runs are about 2/3 of the world's supply of wild salmon. And that's a lot. That's a huge amount of provisions for a world supply. And we need to protect it. We need to make sure that it's managed so that it lasts for the next hundreds of years, because people are increasingly relying on the health of Bristol Bay salmon.
No complacency from Hazel. That's what I'm hearing. So, Mr. Troll, will you just keep sailing that boat?
Well, we hope that COVID will let us sail it back next year from Homer to Naknek in July. If you look at our Facebook page, we found the right color for it, and we're getting the sail made. Everybody's sort of ready to do it. It's just we got to get there. So that's, I guess, in my immediate future, that's a big project. But I want to echo Hazel's concern. I mean, I don't see the land trust getting out of the conservation business, but we are worried about climate change, and we have been working with many of our partner agencies establishing a stream temperature network throughout Bristol Bay so that we can begin to understand, where and how salmon might be affected by features of climate change. And it would be nice to focus more on that and not have to have a defensive posture with respect to Pebble all the time. And then to echo Kim, certainly taking advantage of the fact that we have had a great union among commercial and sports fishermen and subsistence fishermen. We want to really get focused to our Bristol Bay Fly Fishing and Guide Academy, and BB&C and Kim in particular have been very helpful in getting that going. It's 10 years. It's been a great effort to get more of our kids into that aspect of the economy in Bristol Bay, and BB&C is now invested in it. So I think there's a bright future there, and I think I'd like to see us all concentrating on getting that bright future back for us. So those are my thoughts, and look out. Let's keep an eye on, we'll sail that boat back to Bristol Bay next year. Hopefully there's good weather, and we'll get it to Naknek and just have a great old time.
Well, I look forward to the stories from that and seeing that boat maybe down in Homer before you leave. We want to give a very hearty thank you to our panelists, Kim Williams, Hazel Nelson, Tim Troll. Really appreciate your time today. Our audience, thank you so much. Next year, we really hope to be back in person in DC with some sumptuous sockeye salmon and Alaska brewery beer. And now, like I mentioned, we're going to go to the video from Jason Cheng. It's not very long, but it is powerful. I urge you to watch it. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
High